What's up, world? This is Raw with Live Loud coming back at you guys again with Say It Loud. All right, guys. So today my interview is with a dear friend, Christine, that I got to meet while traveling in India. And Holi, first of all, was the top of my bucket list. For you guys who don't know, it was a color festival that goes on in India. It's a Holi celebration that goes on, and it's been so high on my list. And I had the privilege and on this adventure to go ahead and meet Christine. So, hey, Christine, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. So just a bit of backstory. Again, Say It Loud is all about really celebrating people's story, to hear about what people are up to, what people encounter, what supports them being who they are. And one of the reasons I had Christine, that she's going to go and introduce herself a little bit more about what stuff she does. But as a photographer, as a writer, as a poet, and just be able to just share her light and her energy to experience it firsthand was really awesome. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you and connect with you again. So I'm Christine. My mission in this life is to create healing throughout the world, and I do that through my creative arts, so poetry, storytelling, photography, and I also am a part-time nurse, so I do it in a clinical setting as well.
Oh, awesome. I didn't know that, actually. That's great. And I love that you start with your mission and how you fulfill that, right? There's so often that we ask people, especially in America, I'm so used to this, right? It's who are you? And before we even get into that, we dive into what do you do? You know, hi, this is my name, and what do you do? And we don't really necessarily talk about who we are and the mission behind that. So tell me a little bit more about that. Was this always your intention to bring healing, or is this something that you unveiled and discovered?
Honestly, I think I always knew it in my bones since I was a child, until it was about, a couple of years ago where I really found out that's my purpose in this world. And I had to go through and I still have to go through a lot of healing from a lot of childhood trauma and, just crazy life experiences. So, and I know that, if I have to go through things like that, there are people, one, that are worse off than me, and two, that need the same type of tools and help that I needed as I, navigate my way through figuring out just honestly how to be like a normal human in this world without getting my own way. And it's really hard to do when you have a lot of things kind of anchoring you down, and a lot of that looks like trauma and stuff that needs to be worked through and released. So
Yeah, I really thank you for even diving in with even just that and sharing that, because a big motivation on why I do what I do comes from pain. It's not just, oh, this is a nice idea and we go through, but I know personally I've experienced a lot of things that I utilize my creativity as a funnel to transition what I'm experiencing and funneling it to something new. So what was your first time really exploring that? Was it photography? Was it writing? Or how did you start interacting with that trauma?
It was definitely writing since I started writing when I was like 7. And it was the only way I knew how to express my emotions in a safe space without judgment, without shame, without fear. It gave me the opportunity to really look at myself and look at my thoughts and kind of decipher what's real and what's not. And I think a lot of the times these narratives that we have in our minds, we end up identifying with them. And that can be so limiting in our day-to-day living with relationships and just, our own evolution. And so I didn't know it back then how much it would really help me out right now. And yeah, writing is to me the most powerful tool.
Yeah, and I really love your writing. I really love the intimacy, the connection, the transparency and what you share. And it's easy to connect with you and at the same time see ourselves in it, because we're so much more alike than we are different, right? There's so many of us that have been through traumatic things and we belittle it because someone else has gotten it worse, or because that's just how life is. And you know, there's so many people who subscribe playing the victim, right? And they just get stuck there with no fault of their own. Is that, you know, they might not know any better. So when did you start taking this outside of writing for yourself and start contributing and healing other people?
That was a really tough transition for me.
Okay.
I never believed that I was a good writer, or not saying never, but I didn't think I was, you know, quote unquote good enough. You compare yourself to all the other people out there that just seem better and, you know, just everything that you are not.
Right.
There was a time 2 years ago where I had really looked at myself in this honest way and looked at my, you know, purpose. And I'm like, these words have healed me in the most profound, transformational way. Like I feel like I have an obligation to share them. Like it is kind of, there's no choice. And every time I find myself like, you know, the imposter syndrome of who am I, or, you know, you're not good enough or whatever, like I can immediately cut that down with there's one person out there that will find some sort of resonance or healing within my words, and they deserve, you know, they deserve to be heard for people that need it. And especially there's topics that I talk about that are very very vulnerable and very raw, and I think a lot of people hide behind those, and we need more people to use their voice for good and for empowerment, for healing.
Yeah, I agree right on. There's so many of us, like I was saying, we go through these experiences, but healing becomes this such an individualistic journey because we think that it's only us, or this is our pain, it's not your pain. But there's so often that we share a lot of that. Not that we share the same experience, but we share the same impact or a similar impact in how it phases us and how it belittles us or burdens us or any of that stuff. So to take your learnings and your process of healing and share your methodology through your writing, through your creativity, through your art, it's really awesome. So what's an adventure of yours? What's one of your stories that really supported you and given you fuel to keep on being who you're being?
So an adventure that I will never forget is when I traveled to Guatemala and I met a friend there who he is from Amsterdam, and I had 5 days there. So it was a very short trip, and we got stuck in a little town called San Marcos right off of Lake Antigua because we missed our ferry for the night. And so the next morning we had all this time to spare, and San Marcos is a very spiritual, magical place for those of you that have never been. But I went to Kundalini yoga that morning, and I had this crazy spiritual awakening, this opening. That's not even the part of the story I'm going to get into, but this also opened me up to this experience of, I met this woman that was like, oh, there's a cacao shaman that lives here. Do you want to come with me and go to this event? And I'm just like, sure. Like I usually say yes to anything because I just love, new adventures and new experiences, especially if it has to do with healing, and ceremonies like that often do. So I planned to meet her there in the afternoon, and I show up and she actually didn't show. And so I'm there with like 15 strangers in this like shaman's little hut, and like it was beautiful too, right off the water. And there's this gentleman named Jeff sitting right next to me, and he had to have been like 75 years old or something. And when you meet a person and you just feel some sort of connection to them, like we met in another life, or I know you through some other energetic form. Like he just felt so I just was so intrigued by him, and I couldn't figure out why. And so the shaman called on like everybody individually through this like meditation to work out something to release, pretty much. And I hadn't been called yet, but I was, of course, like crying about like everybody else's experiences. And then he called on Jeff, And he had Jeff do this one meditation. And essentially what it was like Jeff's release of his father's abusive patterning that had been deceased. So what it was just like he had closed his eyes and he had felt like the energy of like the trauma and the pain and all of that kind of be released from him. And he's just sobbing and his wife sobbing. And what I did was I got on the floor and like sitting up next to him, I got on the floor and I just like leaned my head on his knee. And I just knew he needed some sort of comfort, but not an overkill. And I just start like uncontrollably crying, like I could not stop. And it felt like I was holding his pain and his trauma in my own body. And I'm a sensitive, empathetic person. That's something that I've done my whole life, but it was in that moment where I recognized, oh shit, I do that all the time and I don't even realize. And so after that experience, I get up and I have to go like catch my ferry to the Airbnb I had already missed the night before. And I'm getting up, I'm packing up all my things, I'm thanking the shaman, and he was just like, oh, hold on, miss, like, will you stay for a second? And I said, sure. And he was like, I want you to sit down in front of this young gentleman right here with your arms open. And so I sat down in front of this gentleman. He had been like 18, I don't know, the most beautiful teal eyes I've ever seen. And he had me like hold out my hands, close my eyes, and he took this young gentleman through like a traumatic release. And what he told me to do was like hold the guy's trauma in my hands and like release it up to the angels essentially. And as I was doing it, I didn't know, like I'm not psychic, but I didn't know what the guy was releasing, but I knew it was so painful because all I could feel was like darkness and heaviness. And of course I'm crying and he's crying. And so I just like lifted up to the angels, and it was just like the most beautiful experience I'd ever had. And at that moment, I'm getting up to pack my stuff after I'm crying. I'm totally disoriented. And the shaman goes, you are a healer. Stop running away from yourself. Stop running away from yourself. And I look at him and everyone else is like bowing and like crying. And it was just like this insane experience. And I wasn't even supposed to be there. That's the crazy part. And I walk away from that knowing that my sensitive and my empathetic nature is not a burden, it's a gift, and I need to use it in a way as a vessel for other people, because there's everybody that needs that type of tool, and if I have the gift, then I have to use it, so.
Yeah, wow. You just gave me chills with that part of saying that your sensitivity is not this burden, that there's so many people who resist their vulnerability, their connection, their ability to be empathetic and connect to that level. I myself used to really resist my heart or the way that I wanted to love people. I would get kind of frustrated with myself because it hurts. It feels painful. But to know that you had that experience of like, wow, this is actually my strength. It's not a weakness. It's a gift that you have, and I experience it. I mean, one of the reasons why I says like, look, I don't actually know you very well. We spent that pretty much day together throwing colors in people's faces and taking pictures, and but we've had a connection, and it's you have such a vibration to you that's really powerful, and it's not overpowering. It's a powerful in a very delicate way. It's a very powerful in a very permitting way. It's not this aggressive anything. It's just space. And to hear your story about you're in this space with these shamans and you're holding space for other people, right? As I find myself as a pillar, and when things are going to like bad or struggling, or people around me are going through something, I constantly experience myself as a pillar. And with your story, I just imagine you as this kind of funnel of just purifying and transitioning this energy. Wow, that's really amazing. Did you travel a lot before then, or because I know you're a big traveler, right?
Yeah. I started my first study abroad trip when I was 19. And there was three things I knew what I wanted to do as a child. It was travel the world, become a nurse, and write a book. Which now it's amazing to say that all three things have happened. But so yeah, I started traveling when I was 19, and then I'd probably up until then I traveled, to Europe, Africa, New Zealand, Iceland, quite a bit. Obviously, I have a lot more trips now after Guatemala, but yeah. So that was one of the that was like my first trip I had where it was more about self-discovery and less about partying or meeting people or the things that you kind of do when you're starting off, you know, seeing the world, seeing other places, So it changed the way I travel now, which is really fantastic.
Yeah. And so what is next on your list? What are you up to? What are your intention of creation?
So I just finished writing my book. I just finished my first manuscript, which feels so good. It's been 3 years. And yeah, so right now I'm working on just the self-publishing whole process and trying to trust the flow, trust in divine timing, meet it with space and love and nurture, but not suffocation and obsession, and perfectionism, which I can easily totally get on that wagon, as I think a lot of creatives do. So right now I'm just trying to see when the message that I have to say, when the world needs it the most, I'm trying to be aware and pay attention to when is the right time for me to put that body of work out there, because it's definitely for a special population. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That's great. So that brings me into this. There's a lot of people that are home right now. We were just speaking about this, that there's a lot of people who are confined to their homes, to their apartments, whatever it might be. And they're cutting out a lot of their normality. They're forced out of their normality of having to go to work and just be on this automatic mindset, right? And so I know a lot of people, and again, I myself in the past have utilized these distractions to spend time away from my healing, spend time away from what things I get to confront, what things I get to heal from. And so right now, I would imagine that there's a lot of people at home not knowing to do with their energy, including their trauma, including their pain, and cut from so many distractions. So what would you suggest for the people at home that have this time right now? What would be your message to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with everything that's going on, a lot of people do forget that there are people that deal with mental illness like depression and anxiety, and feeling isolated and alone and away from community and friends and loved ones can totally increase those emotions. I am, someone that does go through both anxiety and depression, and I try to use these tools as much as possible to manage it. So right now, I think what we need more than ever is to allow ourselves to sit with ourselves more, to really meet our shadow side, to really not be afraid of it. I think a lot of people run away from it because they're afraid to meet themselves. And honestly, I know I did that almost my entire life. But once I really had the opportunity, like I hit a rock bottom and I was forced to do it, and it changes your life in so many different forms, because you not only get to really meet yourself for the first time, but you get to become aware of your value, of your light, of what you have to offer in this world. But you can't see those things unless you meet your shadow side first and work through that stuff that you've been putting off. And because that stuff is going to pop up in your other things, and it's all connected. And honestly, like for me, I don't think you can truly understand someone else fully unless you understand yourself first. And you can't heal somebody else or help others heal unless you start with yourself first. And yeah, I just really encourage people to use this time to meet themselves and express their truth and really find out who they are, because everyone in this world has a story to tell, whether it be through the arts or through, you know, anything, any sort of vehicle you can imagine. But you don't know what that story is unless you be honest and real with yourself. So yeah, that's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of people that avoid spending time with themselves because they could experience it as a painful process. But one of the things that's come to my mind that I'm speaking to you right now is if you sit and you write, if you have all this experience kind of built up and you experience this burden and you commit to writing or playing music or creating art, some type of vehicle where you get to express that self, that experience itself might be painful at first. As we're writing, as we're bringing to mind in our consciousness our trauma and our pain, that might be in a very uncomfortable setting. But what gets created is that when we empty that stuff out of us, then we have that space within us. And in that space where we have maybe not absent, but a relief, even for moments of practicing, releasing that type of energy, then we have that time to ourselves to really spend with, what do we really want? How do we really access that? And it's not just a survival game anymore. It's not just an avoidance game of being distracted and running away from pain, but I embrace my pain, and there's more to me than just that. So now that I have this vehicle, like art, like writing, like photography, like music, like anything, now I could spend that time with myself and get to know a deeper level, and therefore create a more an authentic reality for ourselves.
I love that. I identify with that so strongly. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this, man. I know you have tons of stories more, but you know, this intention was just to have these stories go a week long, and now I have more than 3 weeks of interviews of people doing that, which is amazing. So hey, who knows? I would love to hear more stories, but let's drop some handles. Where can people follow your work, read more about what you're up to, and see your adventures, see your art?
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Instagram. It's my full name, Christine Aitchison. My last name is Aitchison. It's a pretty hard one to spell. So yeah, you can follow me on there. That's where I'm pretty much most active right now. Okay. I also have a website, christineaitchison.com, where you can see more of my photography, of my travels, and some of my poetry and all that stuff on there as well. So.
And is your book available for purchase already, or is it going to be?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, great. Let us know when you're going to have your release party. Who knows? Maybe you could come over to New York and we'll meet somewhere else in the world and do a release party there.
I would love that.
That would be amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. Again, my intention with Live Loud and Say It Loud is to really celebrate people like you who are up to something, who are creating through their passion, through their art, through their work, in a form that is creating success for yourself, but at the same time liberating and healing others. And man, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for spending the time with me, and I look forward to hearing more.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I cannot wait to do this again.
All right, everyone. So tune in to another episode of Say It Loud, where we get more and more extraordinary people from around the world sharing their stories. And again, if you know any people that has a powerful story, who has a message that they want to share, please connect them and let's get them being as loud as possible. All right, guys, sending lots of love. Thank you very much. Peace out, guys.